Hello, I'm Howard. I've worked in UK railway engineering for nearly 20 years in everything from maintenance, renewals and fault response to project work, design work and management. I wanted to talk today about this game DayZ or DayZ for the British audience. Was suggested many times in the comments to have a look at the railways in this. I'm always honest about if I've played the game much or not, and I haven't played this much, if at all. So pardon my noobishness with this game. I'll be mainly looking at the railways. And what I do in these videos is basically have a look at the railway and see what the developers got right, what they got wrong, what they could have done better, and some of the design features of the railway. Basically just gives me an excuse to explain some stuff. So let's begin. First things first, we can see ballast, sleepers, and rail. Classic stuff. This is flat bottom rail. A lot of my viewers will be familiar with this at this point. There's very used worldwide sort of design, flat bottom. There are other types of rail, but this is kind of the standard now. The flat bottom rails held in onto the top of the sleeper by a base plate with some fastenings. These are a screw down type. This is kind of realistic. Nothing too outlandish there. The sleeper spacing is a little bit wide for me. It's 650 millimeters sleeper end to sleeper end on the same edge. So this is a bit wider than I'd expect, and the sleepers are a bit wider than I'd expect. Maybe just a bit of a scaling problem. It's just a bit wide for the load bearing, particularly for freight. They've modelled the ballast quite well, though. This is a good representation of what it would be. Ballast's obviously important for drainage, for weight distribution. So as the train rolls over, it's not. If it was sat on top of concrete, there'd be a lot of stress in the rail and the components and the sleepers, and everything would get bashed about and squashed. But the ballast gives it that almost cushion effect. So it's important to have that. So it's good they modelled it. This plant's a bit in the way, but looking at the switches and crossings, there's a few problems here. The switch rails. So the switch rail on this side is just one lump of rail that clips through the next lump of rail. So a real switch rail should be on the inside and it should plane down to a point, much as it has done here in this screenshot from Stalker 2, where they have modelled the switch rail planing down to a point to allow the train a gradual transition into the switch to direct the forces around properly instead of just coming up against the end of a rail and battering it. You'll notice also the stretcher bars are missing from DayZ, whereas you can see here in this picture there are stretcher bars between the two switch rails to maintain that gap you need to get the wheels through the end of the switch. And the same on this side, it just sort of clips in, but not everywhere. This game does have some switches and crossings where they've actually bothered to plane down a switch rail. So I don't know why they've not done it everywhere, because they've done it with one bit. I don't know if they did it at the bit we'll come on to shortly, and then just didn't bother carrying it through. But this is a classic game crossing where a train wouldn't actually go through there. They just clipped rail through each other at the back. That's never going to work in reality, because if you imagine a wheel coming along this rail, it's going to hit that rail and completely derail the train. Unfortunately, it's just going to hit that side of the crossing. And the same happens if we try and turn that way. It just hits the crossing again. So they have actually got a proper crossing later on in the game. Well, not later on in the game, but elsewhere on the map, I should say. So we'll look at that shortly. But they've actually put a real one in, so it's strange that they haven't put it everywhere, but we'll see. They've got some good examples and some bad. Sleepers, so they've made the classic video game mistake of having two rows of sleepers just clipping through each other instead of, as we've seen, once you get to the tied area, which is just behind the crossing, all these here should be one huge long sleeper that goes over both tracks as they're turning out. And you shouldn't have these two rows clipping through each other like this. Anywhere this side of that crossing should be the big long timber pieces, and the crossing itself it is a bit too sharp, so it turns out very rapidly, and no train's going to have the sort of bogie and axle length to get out of this very successfully, which is a bit of a shame. They could have just made the turnout a bit longer, but again, elsewhere in the game they have made a long turnout, so it's like the tracks in this game have been designed by two different people. because this is really rudimentary stuff with clip-in sleepers, no crossing, no switch rails. But elsewhere in the game, they have all that. So I don't really understand the disparity unless they started running out of time and just started building any old tracks after they've made a few good ones elsewhere. And in contrast to that last switch we just saw, that last Pieces of Switches and Crossing, this is really quite a well-made, complicated and detailed set of switches and crossings. This is a double-sided double turnout, one way going right, one way going to the left, quite similar to some stuff you get in reality like this. Um, you can see they've modelled the switch rail here, the switch blade. They've planed that down, like I said they didn't on the last set. They've gone through the effort of planing this switch blade down to the right sort of proportions to get get it fit up at the end and get the train around the switch. Still no stretcher bar, but that's okay. But it's like it's been made by a different person. Even behind the switch, if you look, they've got slide chairs. So they've moved the fastening off the inside of the switch rail and moved it off to the side. So the switch rails have that metal piece to glide over on and back. And this is a point indicator. You can see this is set off to the left, and if you look at the switch on the end, it is actually set to go off that way. Um, that's a little shunt indicator. You can move these over to the left and right. So they've actually put point operating equipment in here, and that comes in and it's affixed to the rails. It's affixed even to the switch rails, which are the two rails in the middle. That's correct. Some games like Far Cry 5 made the mistake of affixing it to the stock rails that don't move, but they've fixed it to the right ones here. And like I say, they've got these slide chairs here, which that's good to see. They've gone through the effort of moving the fastening off the sleeper, so to accommodate the slide chair. They have actually put some longer timbers in here. See, that one goes all the way across, and they've got this really quite wrong. This crossing, it's spaghetti junction here with rails, but they know it needs to be done. See, they've got what Americans would call guardrails or check rails at the sides of the switch here, and they've actually made a semi-working turnout system with a crossing nose and guardrails and a bit of a crossing. It's totally unlike the last set we saw. Like I say, this is probably designed by two different people with different levels of knowledge of railway systems, because it's rudimentary, but it's miles better than the last set of S&C we saw. It's got the long timbers, crossing nose, and a double turnout. Fastening's all the way through at the right place. Fastening the check rails in. Look, they've fastened in the guardrails down onto the timber, and then you've got another crossing over there. And see at the back there's another crossing just up here, and they've not put a crossing in here. So it's very inconsistent, this game. Just back there, they'd put a real crossing in, or a frog, as Americans might say, and guardrails, and then they've not bothered to do it here when they can do it. It's just very unusual that it looks like it's very detailed in some areas and completely lacking in others. But I would say whoever designed this is just showing off now by putting a single crossing turnout in. This is a complicated bit of railway, not quite long enough, and it's missing stretcher bars and point operating equipment, but it makes total sense. This is a real style of crossing and crossover you can get. This configuration exists in reality. So, and it makes sense in the game. It works in terms of the layout, in terms of the train getting from A to B. Overhead lines. This game has a electrified overhead line system, and you can see it's got most of the right components. It's got the mast itself, the cantilever, and those two wires that go over the middle of the railway there. The top one's the catenary wire that suspends the bottom one, which is the contact wire. The bottom one of the two wires here that goes over the top of the railway is where your pantograph would be touching. There are a few bits missing. For example, I'd like to have seen a few more droppers, which are the piece of wire between the catenary and the contact wire that hold it up. The whole purpose of that top wire is to hold up the bottom wire. Um, bit of a rail break here. Good thing there's no trains rolling over that. They've just put two panels together by the look of it, and it's gone a bit misaligned. I haven't actually seen any joints in this game thinking about it, so it could be that it's all continuously welded. So that's one explanation, or they just didn't put joints in. But the overhead line system, pretty good, and it goes where you've got much wider track sections. So where there's like one or two lines, you've got these signal masts, these overhead line masts, and where it goes to many lines alongside each other, it goes to one of those larger gantries that goes over the top of all the lines. Let's ask this maintenance guy if he knows what's going on here. So the maintenance guy said, you can see where it goes over multiple lines, it moves into this long gantry system, which is what would happen in reality. They've done quite well there. Instead of putting like loads of masts in, they've gone for an overhead span gantry sort of system. That's good. Good to see. Good that even in zombie form, the maintenance guys are still wearing the high vis. Good to see. Safety ever the issue, even when you're the undead. The actual layout of the track here and where the lines actually lead and where they terminate, it makes perfect sense for a freight depot. Those big hoppers there, I'm assuming they load up some freight here. It's really quite industrial looking. Big buffer stop there to park the train up and then send it back out off the loop onto the rest of its journey. Signals and a level crossing. This is some good stuff to see. Getting more impressed with this game. So this looks like a 4-aspect signal. So it'll probably be red, green, yellow, and double yellow. Double yellow being between yellow and green. So not quite as fast as green, but slightly faster than yellow. More proceed. Disconnection box here at the base of the signal. So your line side cable will come to the bottom of there, and then the cable for the signal head will go up the pole along the inside. Mounted on a concrete base. This is very common. Nice ladder. Well, grips on either side to act as a ladder. That's fairly common. Not so much in Britain, but elsewhere they have ladders like that. Signal placement throughout this game, not bad. So they've not done it perfectly, but they've done it vaguely correct. So they've got signals on the exit of yards like this one, leading out, signals on the exit of sidings there. They've got them in vaguely the right places. They've had a bit of thought about where they'd put them. And there we have an attempt at a ground signal or a shunt signal. They've gone for the same 4-aspect head off the tall ones, a bit obscured by vegetation there as well. That needs cutting back. But yeah, they've attempted a sort of shunt ground signal, leaving that loop there, coming out of that platform. That's a kind of normal thing to have. I don't know that it'd look the same and be a 4-aspect signal. Not a bad model though, other than you wouldn't be able to get in the back of the signal. You'd have to take the entire signal head off that post, because the post is right behind the signal head where you'd normally open the door at the back to get to the signal light modules or lamps that are in there and change them out, change the wiring. You'd have to take the entire signal head off the post, unless it's got sort of a detachable front. That's where you normally have the post ending under the signal. Look, you can see some sunlight on the lens there. See, it's just the sun's there and it's reflecting onto the lens even underneath the hood. So the idea of these signal hoods is to stop wrong side failures, because what can happen, especially if you've got coloured lenses, is the sun can shine on the lens as it is there, and a driver departing a station could read that as a green if it was a green lens, and that could sort of reflect the sun and potentially tell the driver proceed when it's not safe to do so. So managing sunlight on signal lenses is it's a real and everyday issue, more prevalent in the winter and sort of autumn months when the sun gets quite low, and the sun will reflect off different lenses and junction indicators and falsely tell trains to proceed when they shouldn't. That's the danger. That's what you get with sunlight. It's a very real issue. You have a specific signal sighting engineer, in fact, to deal with that sort of thing, who's a specialist, and they will sort of map the trajectory of the sun at different times of year onto the signal and try and fit different hoods and different lenses to try and counteract the issue. You can put films. There's all sorts of things you can do. Another signal here leading into this freight yard. I was thinking it's possible that the bottom aspect on these signals could be white, like a permissive shunt move to get trains in and out of yards rather than a second yellow. It's possible. I don't think this is any country in particular. I think it's a fictional country, if I'm right. So it's difficult to say what should be real there. Bit of a platform here, nice overhanging coping stone on the top. This sort of thing came in instead of flat platforms for two reasons. Number one, for safety, so if someone did fall into the platform, you can sort of at least roll into the corner at the side of the train, right into the platform. That's what the safety instruction is to do. If you ever fall into a platform, you get right in there under the overhang. And the other reason that a lot of the time these days you would have cable ducting down there, and you'd run your cable in through the platforms and have disconnection boxes bolted onto the wall, maybe. So that's not a bad little platform, approximately the right dimensions. Very important to keep the track away from the platform to the right distance, because you want it to be in that golden zone where it's not too far away, as that passengers have a big gap to contend with and they might fall down the side, but not too close as the you get platform strike where the train hits the platform. That is a problem. I've seen it before where they've renewed coping stones on the platform edge and it's scraped the side of a train. That can happen, so you need to use a platform gauge to maintain that ideal distance between that tolerance between the train and the platform edge. And here we are at a level crossing. It looks good initially, all the right equipment's there. The red and amber road lights, it's all mounted to a post. Counterweights on the booms as well, that's good to see. It's important to have a counterweight on the boom, otherwise you just burn the motor out if there wasn't some sort of weight on the other end, obviously, because then it's a bit more balanced. The boom itself looks to be of a wooden construction, and then this box back here is where all the electrical components would be. In that box, there'd be a motor, various bits of wiring, and then a lever contact band, probably one that has, when the barrier reaches a certain point, a contact will make to give it down detection and say this is down, so you can clear the signal for the train. And there'll be one for up, so once all the signals go up, it switches the light. Once all the barrier booms go up, it switches the lights off after a detection contact makes when it reaches the top. And then in the middle, there will be the drive up and drive down bands that raise it and lower it using the power of the motor. I don't see any audible warnings. There's usually an audible warning as well, some sort of sounder or audible alarm. But yeah, the level crossing deck, relatively good. You probably raise the road a bit higher either side of it, to be honest, rather than create that big speed bump, because what can happen there, you run the risk of grounding some vehicles. So if a long, low, flat-bedded lorry was coming along here, it could potentially ground on that and get stuck with an oncoming train. So you wouldn't really want that. You'd have to raise the road either side up a bit more and just put a bit of a crossing in like it is, but flatter, so that you've not got such an obstacle to get over in the middle of the road. So this game does have trains, and I believe on the modern version of the game you can drive the train. I'm not sure if that's a mod, but I've seen on YouTube people rolling locomotives with carriages about. Usually they base a train on a real life model. Maybe someone in the comments knows, because there's a lot of locomotive experts out there from around the world, but I don't know what this is based on exactly. It looks American affair to me. It looks like an American piece of kit, but I'm not entirely sure. Hard hat there. Safety always important. Let's have a look at the train wheel profile. Oh, this is in Britain what we would call 50p'd, because it looks like the 50 pence piece with all the corners. Oh, zombie there. But yeah, they've not modelled a thoroughly round wheel, but that's okay. Here we are on the top of the train, and you can see there's a couple of horns, the exhaust for the diesel, and a vent at the back. But what there isn't is any pantograph or any overhead line equipment. So this looks to be diesel only rather than diesel electric, because there's no overhead line equipment. So this game overall, a real mixed bag. Better than I was expecting, actually. From the look of the first set of points I come across, I thought, here's some classic mistakes. The two rows of sleepers clipping through each other, no crossings, so they're just rails clipping through each other. And I thought there's a lot of classic video game mistakes here. But they also did quite a lot right. The signaling's surprisingly good. They've got them in sort of the right places. It's not exactly right. I mean, the signals are a little bit high and they're not really facing the direction I'd expect for approaching round curves and stuff like that. They're a bit infrequent. There's not many signal types, so you'd have a couple of different signal types and junction indicators and shunt or permissive move signals with that many sidings, because a lot of this is freight. There's a lot of freight yards knocking around, and there's a station that looks like it's for passengers, but it looks largely freight. There's plenty of purpose for the railway, so all the lines actually go places, and they've put appropriate switches in for all that. So there was that one junction where they got this one where they've got a bit creative with the crossing types. I mean, it's not done exactly right, but they've thought about what type of crossing they'd need to get the lines to go where they'd need to go. So when you're designing a real railway, that's something you've got to consider. Where are the tracks going to converge, and what sort of crossing are you going to put in your transition lengths, and what sort of line speed you can get away with for the length of the switch. So they've put some thought into that, and they've put some thought into taking the fastenings out to make slide chairs through the points. It's ballasted all the way through, which is good to see. Sleeper spacing's a little bit off. I like the overhead line system. I didn't go too much into it in this video. I probably will do a video more in depth on overhead lines in the future, but in this one at least, it has a difference in the structures for the catenary system, so that it has like your single mast for the single line sections, and then goes into that big long gantry span for the areas where it's multi-line, and then it stops altogether when it gets into some of the freight depots where you don't really need it, and they'll just shunt around on diesel. Some level crossing equipment and signage, everything's vaguely correct. They've got the road lights and the type of barrier and the operating equipment and the counterweights. And there's no audible warning, but there might not be in this fictional place. The road surface needs a bit of work. They've put some thought and effort into it. It's better than I thought it would be at first. So with all that in mind, I can probably give it a 5 out of 10. Thanks for tuning in.